Welcome to the Healing Trauma Podcast, a space for those who are healing from complex and developmental trauma. Introducing your host, Monique Coven, a certified trauma recovery coach, survivor, and thriver. The intent of the podcast is to provide helpful information with insight that can validate, encourage, and support you on your healing journey. You're going to hear stories from other survivors and trauma experts, featuring therapists, coaches, and practitioners. We will open up the conversation on effective trauma healing modalities, practices, and tools. If you are interested in trauma recovery coaching, as well as recommended books and healing resources, head over to www.thehealingtraumapodcast.com. And now, here is your host, Monique Coven.
Hi, Monique. It's so good to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
I love your work because you talk right to the heart. All the issues that we experience, you just go there. So I actually wanted to bring you on after I had read one of your posts that was about advocating or trying to learn how to advocate after we've been raised in these homes where we were not allowed to voice our needs, have needs, speak up because we had narcissistic caregivers, or if not narcissistic tendencies, which means basically our needs were not recognized and their needs and what they wanted was priority. So I wanted to talk about how that impacts us, and most importantly, how do we start to begin to shift or start to recognize and use our voice to talk about our needs?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for introducing that topic. It's very hard for people who have never been in narcissistic family cultures to actually understand just how difficult it is for others to actually just set a boundary or advocate for their needs. But for like survivors of a narcissistic family culture, it is really terrifying. It is, I guess, an equivalent that we can think about could even be showing up to the most important job interview of your life. That the adrenaline that you will experience, the fear of getting something wrong, the fear of how the other person will look at you, the power dynamics in the interview room as well, knowing that you're being evaluated. And this is the kind of dynamics that, I mean, it's not really the full dynamics, but that kind of, like, if you can imagine that kind of tension, that kind of stress that your body will go through, that's kind of how somebody who has been through being raised by a narcissistic parent or a parent with narcissistic traits, so we're just going to use this term interchangeably, that's the kind of tension that they would, the kind of fear, the kind of adrenaline, fight, flight that would rise whenever they advocate for themselves or even think about advocating for themselves, because we start by having the idea, and even the idea in the early stages of this can be very frightening. Very often the clients that I see, they might not even know yet that their parents are, their parent or their parents are narcissistic. They just come in and they say, oh, I'm a very insecure person. I don't know how to stand up for myself. There's a lot of self-doubt that I carry. And people tend to walk all over me. And I don't know whether that's a problem, but my friends have been telling me, like, why don't you say something for yourself? and I can't. Like, I admire how other people can do it, and it looks like, wow, why can't I do that? So they kind of can watch other people advocate for themselves. And this experience, however, is it's almost like a different reality that they're watching that they cannot imagine happening to themselves. It's like, you can do it, but I can't. I just can't. And as you talk to them, even though, so I'm referring here to, for example, adult clients, even though a lot of them are adults, and a lot of them, by the way, can be very successful in terms of society's definitions of success in their career. And it is still very hard for them to speak and advocate for their own needs, for their own boundaries, which then points to how, I guess, like, some of your audience might be familiar with the language of parts, or younger parts. It just points to how there's a mismatch between how they might be carrying themselves and how they're feeling inside. And often these mismatches are reflective of that there is a younger part that wasn't fully developed, or was abused or traumatized, is kind of being activated in that moment. So I would say that usually when I speak with them, the first stage is to listen to what they're struggling with. And very often the starting point is kind of just asking them questions about their childhood, their parents, asking them how they responded. Oh, okay, so did you ever tell your parents, like, that you needed this? And for a lot of them, these questions can be very bizarre, in the sense of, like, what do you mean? And they would tend to respond to me with, of course I did. I would tell them if I'm hungry, or, so it's very physical needs based. It's very physical, basic, financial needs based. And so I generally would explicitly kind of spell out, like, but what about your emotional needs? For example, if you argued with your best friend in school that day, would you go back and talk to your parents about that? And why not? So this is a way of helping them to then gain a bit more understanding of, first, that they also have emotional needs, because very often this is almost, it's like it's vacant. It's almost like, oh, you mean you mean in my house there were actually 5 rooms? I thought there were only 4. And here I am trying to open up the 5th room and say, like, what about your emotional needs? And I have to kind of explain a little bit of that. And it's when we kind of do that, and sometimes that takes a bit of time, but then they then get a better sense of, oh, hang on, no, not really. And that helps them to get a better sense of what kind of childhood they went through. And they would usually ask me questions. You mean this is not normal? What are you talking about? You mean I can expect, like, I could say what I wanted, and somebody could actually respond to that. And so it's quite a revelation for them to begin with. So that's usually step 1, kind of like some understanding first, about the fact that they actually have needs, about the fact that, yes, you can expect your parents, actually, in healthy parenting, you can expect that your parents would respond to your needs. They might not necessarily be able to attend to all your needs, but you can expect them to attend to your needs at times. And when they can't, you can expect them to explain this to you, to look after you in terms of your emotional understanding of the world. So that's usually the first part. And then after that, it would be kind of, I guess, what my post was about, which is about advocating for yourself, about first starting to learn more about what are some of these needs that you might have, getting to know yourself, getting to know what are your needs, getting to understand that, oh, you mean when I was feeling resentful with this person, why was I feeling resentful with this person? Why was I resentful with my husband when I came home and he just sat on the couch, whereas, you know, there were dishes, there was laundry, and I get mad. What could my resentment be telling me? And it could sometimes, for example, as we explore that, then we get a sense, oh, actually, I also need to feel like that I can rest. I need to feel like it's okay for me to rest. And I didn't know that it's okay because I tend to be on the go, for example. So as we start to identify this, then we need to kind of start to speak up for our needs, because we can't, because people are not mind readers. I think that's a very fundamental thing to remember, that people are not mind readers. And for children of narcissistic parents, the thing is, these children that have now grown up to be adults, they had to be mind readers. They had to be mind readers for their parents. They had to be able to attune to their parents' world. They had to be able to guess what kind of moods my parents are in, and what do I therefore need to do to take care of my parents so that my parent is okay and we stay in good connection with each other. And because they become so skilled at doing this, and this, by the way, is not something to celebrate. This is actually very sad, because it's a skill that is more like a survival skill for them to survive in that family environment. And because they're so good, so skilled at doing that, they might then start to expect other people in their lives now to do that for them as well. So for them to then need to actually advocate for themselves, to actually say, you know, hey, actually, can you help me out with this? It can feel really scary.
I was, you know, everything you're saying is so relatable. And I was just starting with when you were talking about not knowing that parents, caregivers, not attending to our needs is not normal. Meaning, because when you don't know anything else, that's all you know. And you grow up with thinking then that your needs are not important. So of course, wanting to speak up, or like you were giving the example of watching other people speak up and thinking, how do they do? I can't do that, but wow, look at how they do that. You could so understand when you look at the context of being raised without having any of your needs recognized at all, and always being on guard, as you described, the moods of the parent, and trying to sort of shapeshift into whatever they want so that you could feel connected, but also safe inside. So yeah, that makes so much sense. And I remember myself as well I had difficulty. I remember when I got my first job, the idea of asking for stuff on the phone, which was part of my job, terrified me at the beginning, just terrified me. You mean I can ask for some, you mean like, it's just so, yeah.
It's like a revelation.
Yeah.
Yes, and it really is, because if you think about it, a narcissistic home environment is actually like a totally different culture. If we think of narcissism as a culture, it's a very different culture from the way secure attachment kind of cultures are, or even just, you know, less narcissistic cultures are. So when you've been brought up in a narcissistic culture or a narcissistic home environment where everything revolves around a narcissistic parent. I mean, children are often described as an extension of the parents, which means that the child is not seen for the unique, irreplaceable, precious human being that has their own temperaments, personality, needs, has their own strengths, has their own weaknesses. The child is not seen for any of that. The child is seen as, now, what are you going to do for me? And how are you going to, how are you going to serve me? So children of narcissistic parents pretty much exist to serve the parents. If the child does well, and the parents usually tend to want the children to look good, want the children to achieve quite a bit, and it can look like, on the surface, if we don't know about how narcissism operates, it can look like, yeah, they just want the best for you. But when you understand how narcissism operates, and you know that we're talking here about a narcissistic person, then it is, you look good so that I look good. Because when people see that, you are doing well, that reflects well on me. So again, it's a sense of like, I want you to do well so that I do well. And in some sense, children, it's like they exist for the parent. So to actually when children of narcissistic parents grow up, there is a great sense of liberation, actually, because they start to encounter the world, and they start to encounter other kinds of ways of relating to people. And that can be very healing, like, oh, you mean, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. But at the same time, that can be very frightening as well, because they've learned and they've kind of perfected the art of how to keep their narcissistic parent okay. And now to realize that, what, you mean something that I've worked so hard on is no longer valuable, and now I need to actually like speak for myself when I've never done it in my life. I don't know what you're talking about, because in some sense, it's like, let's say I'm in a 30-year-old body. I'm actually like in a 4-year-old body. I'm in a 4-year-old spirit in a 30-year-old body. I've never had that practice, for example. So it can be both very liberating and very terrifying, because the gap between where you're at and where other people who are raised in non-narcissistic family home environments are at, it's really very sad, and there's a lot of grief there.
Yeah, there's a lot of grief there, especially when you start to realize what you've missed, and how now you don't have you have it, but you haven't used it, so it feels like you don't have it, the capacity to start to speak and advocate. I don't know where I heard it, but I love it. So we are already born with that that desire to get our needs met. I mean, from the moment we we're depending on others, and then I'm thinking of a baby reaching out her hands to. So we're born with that desire to say, like, we cry, I need, and we're using our voice to cry. But then as we grow up in these homes, I see it as just being almost shriveled up and stuffed way down to the bottom. But that fire, that I don't know what word to use, but that innate ability to speak and to advocate, or to get our needs met, is there. It's just that it's at the bottom. And
Yeah, absolutely. That's also why I said, like, we might be in our current age, our bodies are our current age, but our souls could be like, or rather this emotional capacity could be like 4 years old. Because actually, like, when you're younger, I think I read somewhere, like, it's up to the age of like 2 years old that children are still trying very hard to advocate for themselves, because that's the way they were built. That's the way that we were naturally built to advocate for ourselves, to cry, to ask. But then a lot happens during this time, and then by the time they hit around 3-4 years old, then that's when the environment starts to reshape this as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you just kind of see that, I get that image of just kind of almost like that dorsal vagal. Okay, it's not going to be safe. It's not okay. And just like, all right, to survive, I will shut off, shut down. And yeah, so I guess where I'd love to go now is, okay, so now we recognize that we would like to be able to, we have needs, we want to be able to start to speak and advocate. How do we start to do that, Jean?
How do we start to do that? We practice, like we start actually awkwardly by learning scripts of how to speak up for ourselves. And it can really just be memorizing sometimes certain scripts. When you know that, okay, I need to speak to this person, rehearsing that a little bit with yourself, rehearsing that a little bit with someone that feels safe for you. And we do that because we're trying to build. First, I mean, when you rehearse and you speak, you're literally speaking about that. So you're practicing, but you're also just trying to build your muscle to actually do that when the time comes, and observing how other people do it and just trying that out as well. That can feel a little bit. That is practice as well. And then you get a sense of like, okay, what works for me and what doesn't work for me yet, because how we advocate for ourselves also has to feel a little bit more, it has to kind of meet us where we're at as well. Like, what stage of the journey are we at? Have we been practicing advocating for ourselves for a while, or are we still at the start? Because if we're still at the start, then how we do it might be less, I guess, less direct. Some people, they can just say no, right? And then they can just move on. But very often for people who have had narcissistic parents, just saying no like that is it's going to be like, well, that's not the level that they feel ready for. And it's like, no, I can't do that. I need to explain it a little bit more. So I think needing to adjust that kind of expectations and meeting them where they're at and what feels a little bit more comfortable, scary. It has to stretch them a little bit, but yet, because they actually have to advocate for themselves, but not too scary such that they can actually say something. So instead of just saying no, maybe I would start off by saying like, you know what, I would really like to, but I can't at the moment because I have this other things to do. So explaining myself a little bit so that it feels like I'm not being too, too rejecting about it to the other person, for example. That these are some ways that we can start off first. What else?
I was just thinking, Jean, about I think it was something that I read in this particular post where you were saying that, and I know because I've noticed this with my own clients, there is this belief that if they do speak up, maybe they're going to appear as narcissistic themselves because they're asking, or they're or they're going to think maybe I'm being selfish because I'm saying no or asking for something.
Yes. This will be usually one of the this is usually one of the kickbacks. Like a lot of people would then say like, no, but then if I do that, that's like me being my parent, and it's very frightening because it almost seems like they themselves are being narcissistic in that moment. So very often they don't realize that actually speaking up for your needs can be done in a very healthy and in a very neutral way. It's not personal. It's not here to hurt the other person. In fact, speaking up for our needs actually helps our relationships because it helps us to show up more, and therefore there's a higher chance that our relationship will be able to grow. So there is. so speaking up for ourselves helps, right? But a lot of the times there's that fear that, okay, if I speak up for myself, this is the only way that I know how to do it is how my parent did it. And that's the voice that I hear in my head, that is how they did it, that makes me feel like I am being my parent right now. And that is really very scary. So part of healing that is helping them to actually realize that, well, okay, it might be scary to say it this way, but you know, recently when you heard so and so speak up, can you recall a time where you heard other people speak up for themselves, and did you feel like they were being too demanding? Did you feel like they were like bullying the other person? Do you feel like they were unhealthy in that way? And very often they can get a sense like, no, that one was actually quite okay, or that one was a bit that one felt a bit too pushy, but this one feels quite okay. So it helps them to then get a distinction. Okay, you know what? Like speaking up for yourself, although the only way I've known it has been the narcissist way of speaking up for myself, but actually, no, I have also been in environments where I have noticed other people speak up for themselves in ways that I didn't think were overbearing, that I didn't think were narcissistic. And it's helping them to cue into those experiences as well, so that they can readjust the distortion of speaking up for themselves, because narcissistic abuse distorts. All abuse distorts, right? And narcissistic abuse is a unique kind of abuse, and it does distort the way that we relate things that would otherwise be very normal for how other people just deal with these things. It's a lot heavier when something has been distorted for you. So helping them to then shift that distortion by helping them to see more healthy examples of how to speak up for themselves, that will be important as well.
Yeah, I'm remembering when I was in university, and I'm so glad they offered that. They should have this. They should have this in schools, like in elementary school even. But it was run by a psychologist, and it was learning how to be assertive. And then she would film us. And I remember there was in our class, you know, me, a social work student, and there was lawyer students and all these people that are getting ready to have to be assertive and practice. And I think that's a really good point, is that we need to practice, and we need to look at others that are doing it in a way that feels like it's not intrusive. It doesn't look like it's harmful in any way, and just watch and practice.
Yeah, watch and feel what that feels like in your body. You realize, oh, that doesn't feel so bad. Practice and realize, do you really feel like you are trying to dominate this other person? Oh, no, not really. It did feel strong, but no, I'm not trying to dominate the other person. Feeling as you're practicing, feeling as you're watching as well. I think another key thing also for children of narcissists, as they are practicing this, is to also, it's important for them to notice how they are different from their narcissistic parent, how they are different from the narcissistic criteria. While there might be some similarities in the sense that, you know, we were brought up in this way, so we were conditioned to think that this was the way of relating. But in our fundamentals, there are some differences. For example, narcissists can't empathize. And very often, these children who are trying to learn to advocate for themselves, they are terrified of advocating for themselves, because they're terrified of being like the narcissistic parents, because they know what that would feel like at the receiving end of it. They don't want to put that on the other person, which means they have the capacity to empathize as well. So sometimes the very fact they're afraid of this, to me, I'm like, you know what? The very fact that you're afraid of dominating the other person, that already says that you're not like your parent. Because do you think your parent would care about this? Do you think your parent would be mindful about this and think about how the other person feels? No. So it helps them to realize, okay, I'm not like, okay, it's a bit safer to do this because, I can empathize. I do think about how other people feel. It is important for me that other people feel okay. And the difference here is I'm learning how I feel okay speaking up as well. I think that's also very important for them to then grow in their safety, to be able to advocate for themselves without feeling like they're turning into their narcissistic parent.
That's such a good point. Yeah, because I know I've heard people tell me that the one thing they don't want to do is hurt other people. And because they've been so hurt and they know what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like it's a lot of these beautiful people actually have a lot of openness to see. They have always been watching how the dynamics are working at home, how the parents are responding, and therefore how they would change their responses. So they are actually very good at watching and noticing how other people are doing. And while some people say, oh, that leads to a bit of codependent dynamics, I think that that's just survival. And that can also be incorporated as part of like, hey, this is a strength. You're able to watch other people's responses. You will be watching and noticing the feedback on the other person's face as you say this. And it can help you therefore be more, and so you're always going to be mindful of the other person already. And if it was too harsh, you can go back to reflect, because you have the capacity to reflect on yourself as well. And then you might go back and say, hey, you know what, maybe I put that a bit too strongly, and actually I meant, I don't know how you felt about me saying that. So yeah, I think like being open, like a lot of these children of narcissists are actually they care a lot about people. They have empathy, and they generally are very open to reflecting on themselves, to reflecting on how they are relating to other people. And these are all great things to tap into so that they feel safer to speak up and know that they're not going to be delivering these things the way that their narcissistic parent did.
Oh yeah, that's so beautiful and true. Yeah. So, one of the things that and maybe this is a good way to sort of end, unless there's anything else you want to say, you really encouraged people by saying, I think you used the term warriors, which I love. You said, you said something like, yes, it's going to be hard at the beginning as you begin to advocate, as you begin, like it's a journey, but it's going to get easier. And I can vouch for that. I don't have a problem anymore speaking up, advocating, so it can change. And I love that encouragement. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I can actually read what I wrote there. So I think I said like, hang in there, dear warrior. Advocating for yourself does get better over time. You're in the transition between one state of being and another. And like a house that is torn down and renovated, before the new house is ready, the renovation process is messy, confusing, and even inhabitable. Transitions are similar. I hope you lean into any safe spaces to rest and nourish yourself in the midst of the hard transition process. Spaces like petting an animal, being in a cafe with a delicious cup of coffee and book, and speaking to friends who see and get you, taking walks in nature. So yeah, I think it is a journey that can feel so frightening and so overwhelming for children of narcissists to go through. It can really feel quite paralyzing as well, because you're literally changing your entire wiring. You're literally I don't know, you're like shedding off your skin and putting on something completely new skins in that sense. And that feels incredibly destabilizing actually during the process. So I really just wanted to encourage everyone who's going through this, that it does get easier, as Monique said. It is not in vain. you're working towards something, and what seems hard today, one day you would actually look back on this and you would forget actually how hard the journey really was. And you would know at that point that, oh, you've arrived at the next state already. I very often like to actually, during the closing sessions with my clients who are ending therapy with me, I very much like to remind them of where they were at when I first met them. And very often they are surprised because moving into the next stage, it's very scary. But when you reach there, somehow it becomes your new normal, and that feels natural now. And because that feels natural, then you forget what used to be your own natural in that sense. And sometimes we can forget how hard we actually worked because of that as well. So I tend to like to remind people of where they started off so that they remember and honor that journey. And in the moment, for most of the listeners here, probably they are on that journey. And I just want to encourage everybody that it does get better. You are going to the next stage. You are, reading up, thinking about these things, trying it out. It is scary. Sometimes you might need a break from trying it out. Sometimes your learned helplessness might get activated. You might feel like, you can never get this right. Take a break in those moments if you need to. And then try again when you feel like, okay, I'm ready to try again, because it's so rewarding to really just free yourself from these cages that you were put in by someone else who never ever let you be yourself, never ever let you be nurtured as an individual. And the process to do that for yourself is very lonely. It's very unnatural as well, actually, may I add. So you really need a lot of compassion and so much encouragement and tenderness to yourself as you're going through this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Jean.
You're most welcome, Monique.
If people want to find out more about your work or follow you on social media, how can they do that?
So I'm on Instagram. I think that's where I'm most active, and my handle is at Cheng psychologist, one word. I'm also on Facebook under Dr. Cheng. I'm not very active there. In fact, I just started my account there. They can also find me on my website, which is still under construction, but it's www.talithakounpsychology.com, and Talitha Koum Psychology is TALITHAKOUM psychology.com. So yeah, these are some ways to kind of get in touch with me.
Great. Thank you for being here today.
You're most welcome. Take care, Monique. Bye.
Bye. Trauma recovery is about finding safety. Safety firstly in our bodies, and then in our experience, in relationships with others. And so part of the work that I do as a trauma recovery coach is help you to begin to get unstuck in those responses that are really in the body. As we know, trauma doesn't live in our thoughts or in our cognitions. Yes, our thoughts play a part, but it begins in our somatic experience. Through the coaching experience, I will give you tools and support to help you to begin to move through those responses where you often find yourself stuck. To find out more about my trauma recovering coaching offerings, you can visit my website at www.thehealingtraumapodcast.com.